Hello everybody. In a social history museum like Toitū, you'd expect to see plenty of images of people and landscapes from days gone by in its pictorial collections. And we've covered quite a lot of these in Talking Pictures to date, but today we're going to look at a different aspect of the museum's art collection, works associated with the science of botany. Back in episode 13 in 2020, we looked at landscape paintings and sketches made by John Buchanan during James Hector's 1863 expedition to explore the western parts of southern New Zealand. What we didn't cover in that episode was Buchanan's botanical artworks, which are also represented in Toitū's collection. In his native Scotland, Buchanan had been a draftsman and pattern designer, but he'd also used his leisure time to pursue his passion for botany. He left Scotland in 1851 and arrived in Dunedin in 1852 to settle on land he'd purchased in North East Valley. Here, his interest in sketching and collecting botanical specimens continued to flourish. He drew these two plants in North East Valley in September 1862. One is an orchid and the other is mistletoe. The only type of mistletoe native to New Zealand is white mistletoe. It's a semi-parasitic plant, and Buchanan has drawn it cohabiting with other species of plants in these two works. During Hector's 1863 expedition, Buchanan spent 4 months camped here in the Matukituki Valley, which allowed him plenty of time for botanising in the beech forest at the lower end of the valley, and in the alpine habitat in the mountains above. On the 2nd of March 1863, he climbed Mount Alta and discovered a previously unrecorded alpine buttercup growing at an altitude of around 6,000 feet. The plant would become named after him, given the scientific moniker Ranunculus buchanani. And here's another ranunculus drawn by Buchanan. This is Ranunculus lyellii, the mountain lily, which was likewise named after its discoverer, Scottish botanist and explorer David Lyell. Buchanan's specimens were displayed as part of the Geological Survey of Otago's exhibit at the 1865 New Zealand exhibition in Dunedin. Also in 1865, James Hector was appointed as the first director of the New Zealand Geological Survey and of the new Colonial Museum, and took most of the Otago Geological Survey staff, including John Buchanan, with him to Wellington. Hector would also become head of the New Zealand Institute and editor of its journal, The Transactions of the New Zealand Institute, for which Buchanan would produce drawings and lithographs. Between 1878 and 1880, under the auspices of the Colonial Museum, Buchanan also produced a 6-part publication titled The Indigenous Grasses of New Zealand, which is said to be the first major botanical work by a botanist residing in New Zealand. Fern collecting had become an increasingly popular pastime in England in the 1840s, and by 1855 the craze had been given its own special name, Pteridumania, fern madness. Specimens were collected, dried and then mounted in albums like these. For some, fern collecting was a commercial opportunity as well as a hobby. William Reed, a pioneer of commercial floristry in New Zealand, was a noted collector of ferns and seeds, and with the assistance of his daughter Annie, produced fern albums and cards for worldwide distribution. Mary Ann Armstrong, another Dunedin resident in the 1860s, 70s and 80s, likewise found commercial success producing albums of ferns. She entered examples of her work in exhibitions, such as the Sydney International Exhibition in 1879, the Melbourne International Exhibition in 1880, and the Dunedin Industrial Exhibition in 1881. She won awards for her work at each of these exhibitions. So too did our next artist, but for her it was watercolours of ferns rather than mounted specimens that met with the judge's approval. Emily Nutt, the eldest of 3 daughters of marine engineer John Nutt and his wife Anne, was born in Australia in the early 1850s. In 1867, John had been employed on the steamer South Australian when it was wrecked on the South Otago coast, and after the wreck he appears to have stayed in New Zealand, signing on with a local shipping company, and later working on Union Steamship Company vessels. His wife and daughters seem to have moved over from Australia to join him in Dunedin about 1869. Emily exhibited a variety of other works with the Otago Art Society in the 1880s. At the 1889-90 New Zealand and South Seas exhibition in Dunedin, she again won a first-class award for her paintings. In the early years of the 20th century, after being in business for a short time selling children's clothing, Emily offered her services as a teacher of painting and drawing. Our final artist in this episode was born in Birmingham, England, and emigrated to New Zealand with her family in the early 1890s, when she was about 10. After attending Otago Girls High School and the University of Otago, Helen Kirkland Dalrymple would eventually return to her high school as a teacher. She taught there from 1913 until her retirement in 1938, and one of the main subjects she taught was, of course, botany. She became an active member of the Dunedin Naturalist Field Club, which had first formed back in 1871, and made numerous field trips to collect specimens. As you can see, she was also a talented artist. She wrote 2 books, Orchid Hunting in Otago and Fungus Hunting in Otago, which she illustrated herself. The images you see here are from a field sketchbook containing illustrations made between 1921 and 1932 in locations throughout New Zealand. That's it for this episode. See you next time, and thanks for watching.